Last episode, we talked with Oceana Canada about how the Canadian government is not really doing well in managing the stocks that they're supposed to be managing, the fish stocks that they're supposed to be managing. This episode, we're going to be talking about the UK government, who are doing the exact same thing in a different way by setting catch limits above what the scientific consensus says. What is it with these negotiators and politicians trying to please people in the short term and really disappointing them in the long term? We've seen it happen before, and we're seeing it happen now, and we'll probably see it happen again unless we stand up and protect the ocean. So we're going to talk about that on today's episode of How to Protect the Ocean. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about what's happening in the ocean. Like, really, what is going on? Folks, here, let me just set out how you, in theory, how you manage a fishery, right? You have a fishing stock. You have your fish stock, right? You know, you've taken data, you know the abundance, you've run it through models, you know what the minimum viable population is, meaning what is the minimum population it would take to continue on to the next generation and the next generation after that and the next generation after that. You run those throughout the year. You see how things are changing based on the data that's coming back to you. And it's a rigorous process, and it's been done all over the world. And then scientists get together, fishery scientists get together, policymakers get together, and they say, hey, based on the science, these are the catch limits. Don't go over this, and you'll have a viable population, a sustainable population. Really not difficult. Follow the numbers, and you should be in the right. Go above those numbers, and you're putting this stock at risk of depleting every single time. And that's what's been happening. So instead of listening to the advice of the scientists, of the fishery scientists, this is within their own government sometimes too, most of the time within their own governments, you have politicians and negotiators who set catch limits above the minimum viable population. Meaning that every year, instead of the population either staying the same or increasing, you see the population maybe staying the same or just below or decreasing. And it might be slow at times, still being tracked by the government, still being tracked by the scientists that work for the government, but then they continue to decrease until you hit a certain point where there's just the catch per unit effort takes longer to catch fish. Everything is harder to catch. The prices go up because there's not as many fish being caught, and eventually you get a collapsed population. If you want an example, that example is in the cod fishery. And I'll explain that in just a minute. Before I do, though, I want to talk to you. If you want to be a fishery scientist and be a part of governments that actually are, looking at stock assessments, they're looking at fishery stocks, they're running the numbers, they're doing the data, or if you want to be a policy analyst or somebody who's involved in policy to help, make sure that, the catch limits aren't above like what they're supposed to be, you can do so by starting your career or switching your career in conservation. And if you go to conservation-careers.com, you will find courses and support for your career. The problem is when we talk about careers in university, we don't get set up properly. We go to our career center and they're mostly for business and marketing students. They're not helping you get ready for that science career that you want, that marine biology career that you want. Conservation-careers.com conservation-careers.com is a place on the internet that allows you not only to see jobs worldwide, but also to get ready for those jobs, to help you prepare that resume, prepare the CV, be ready for the interview, how to get responses to get interviews, and then finally how to get that job. This is a program that I'm actually being a part of. I'm trying to switch my career to communications, and I'm looking forward to it. And so it's something that I highly recommend for you. If you go to conservation-careers.com, and when you check out, when you press checkout and you're ready to buy or you're ready to join the program, just put in SUFB for 33% off. So it's SUFB for 33% off. It just lets you know that you've been listening to this podcast, you're ready for a career, or you're ready to switch your career into more marine biology or marine conservation, and you're going to do that with conservation-careers.com. Let's get back into the episode. Let's talk about fisheries. Let's talk about what's happened to the cod. This is something that I was privy to when I became a graduate student in the East Coast. I was talking. My job had to do with, or my graduate work had to do with macroinvertebrate animals and their stock assessments. And it was 4 years of data because they had just started collecting macroinvertebrate data in their trawled summer catch data. And we looked at it for about 4 years. Now I got, I was piggybacking off of a demersal fish paper and looking for the same kind of things for marine protected areas. But when I was looking at the data, there's a lot of data in there. There's biomass, there's abundance, there's sea temperature, there's salinity, there's depth. There's a lot of information that you can use in there to make the assessment that you need on how these fishery stocks are doing. And there are a lot of fishery scientists who go out there and they run models and they look at the viability of the population. And during the 70s and 80s, cod, the country was founded, in Canada, was founded on cod. Even the northeast of the U.S. was founded on cod. That way you could put a bucket in the water and the bucket would fill full of cod and you just bring it back up. That's how many cod there were in the ocean. And it got to a point where as we were tracking and we were looking at these stock assessments and we were looking at this data, this fishery scientists in Canada started to tell the government, hey, these fish are not growing and they're not staying the same. This is not a sustainable fishery right now. We need to do something better. We need to set lower catch limits. The government didn't listen. They continued to appease the fisheries community, which is fine because the fisheries like Newfoundland, the East Coast, relied on cod fishing. And when the fisheries eventually collapsed, all hell broke loose. People's generational business was ruined and they had no way of making money. It completely changed the way Newfoundlanders made money that were originally in the fisheries or about to inherit a fisheries type of lifestyle from their parents, but had to change. And a lot of them went into the oil and gas industry because that was the only thing that was left that they could do after a bit of training. And it was really gut-wrenching to watch. I remember being a kid, because it was early 90s when this happened, like 91 or 92, and I remember watching on TV the minister in Newfoundland, I think it was in Newfoundland or in Ottawa, they had to barricade their door because fishers came in and were not happy with the minister. This is on a government where we're seeing now, even to this day, where they're not implementing, we talked about last episode, they're not implementing, the sustainability plans, or the critical action plans because of these fishery stocks are getting, in the critical zone where their populations are not staying the same. They're not sustainable and they're depleting every single year. Yet people are still fishing them, whether it be by bycatch, whether it be by anything. There's just the information is not being put together. The plans are not being put together and they're not being implemented. And the management is there. Oceana Canada says you can do this in if you hold for everything else and you just do the management of these species, we could get these species back out of the critical zone and into the healthy zone. And then there's just the amount of information, like there's 40%, almost 40% of the fishery stocks don't have enough information to put them in any of the categories. Like that's just unbelievable. And now here we are. There was a recent article in The Guardian that's been going around over the past weekend, even before that, where conservationists are taking the UK to court for illegally squandering fish stocks. So the Blue Mountain Foundation is challenging the government for ignoring scientific advice, just what I said at the beginning. This is what the EU did back in the day. If you watch the documentary End of the Line, you'll know that the EU used to have scientists set catch limits for tuna. And they would set those limits, and then they would say, okay, we're going to take those limits and we're going to double it. I think it was a catch limit of 15,000 tons. Okay, we're going to double it to 30,000 tons. Just say it for that. I don't know if the amounts are right, but just around that. It's just really the ratio. So they double it. And then they go for negotiations. After negotiations, it's been quadrupled from the original scientific advice. How? How does this happen? Right? And it continues to happen. So we know that it's wrong, but we're trying to appease a fishery that has a lot of lobbying power, right? And so here we are in a situation right now where the UK government has made a decision to set catch limits for fish populations above those recommended by the scientific advice. So it's being challenged in the court. So what they've done, so every year the UK, the EU, and Norway negotiate catch limits for shared commercial fish species for the following year. Now this has been done for the past 3 years since Brexit, right? They are advised by an independent scientific body as to what level is sustainable, just like I mentioned earlier. This month, for the 3rd year in a row, ministers agreed to set limits, to set at least half of the catch limits of shared stocks above scientific advice, so 50% more than what the scientific advice asked. This means it's a green light for overfishing, and that's according to the Blue Marine Foundation, which is true. It's a green light. The previous year, now this is getting a little bit better, the same as last year, was around 50 to 57%. And then the original year, 2 years ago, it was 65% with the catch limits above the scientific advice. And this is, continuing to just undermine the conservation part of what the government actually set out to do. They said, we're going to listen to scientific advice and we're going to set catch limits based on scientific advice. And so this is what happens when you start to catch more, you're getting the population than like more than what's supposed to catch, like especially 50% more. Now you're going to start to see a depletion in the fishery stock. And then it's going to get to a point right now, then you're like, well, hold on. Now we really have to lower the catch limit because people aren't finding fish. And eventually it's just going to close down. So instead of starting to actually listen to the catch limits by the Scientific Advisory Board now and lower it, but allow fishing for longer later on, maybe even increase the fishery after a while, who knows? But even keeping it the same, the fishing community can set targets longer. They can actually fish for longer. But if you continue to increase the catch limit based from ignoring the scientific advice, now what? Eventually, you're going to run out of fish. It happened. We've seen it happen. And the cod stocks in Canada still have not recovered to what it was even close, not even a fraction of what it is, of what it once was. So how do we allow this to go on? And here's the thing. A lot of this doesn't go noticed. A lot of this goes unnoticed. If it wasn't for this Guardian article, which I'll have to admit, the Guardian is really good at bringing about stuff that happens within the government in terms of policy and in around the environment in general. It's not just the same type of information. This is actually pretty good. They've been pretty good in the past from what I've seen. I don't monitor them all the time, but I've seen some pretty big articles come out from an environmental perspective and from a marine perspective, like an ocean perspective. But this is, DAFRA, DEFRA, which I guess is the fisheries department there, they say sustainability has been at the heart of the UK's approach to support the viability of the UK fishing industry, and catch limits have been set in line with obligations under the Fisheries Act 2020 and the Joint Fisheries Statement. So during these negotiations, we pushed for decisions to be based on the best available science to protect key stocks, using evidence from ICES as the starting point. Now, I'm sure that last part of the sentence really matters because maybe it's setting catch limits higher. But I'm not sure they totally understand what sustainability means. When science, this can be the one problem. When science sets a number that people don't like, they ignore it. But the thing with science is it's the truth. Sometimes it tells you a hard truth, and we don't like the results. But as scientists, we just like, okay, this is what it is, and this is what we have to do. But for the most part, people are like, nah, I'm going to ignore it. Climate change? No, I don't like that. I'm going to ignore it. We're just going to continue making profits, and that's what we're going to do. Here in the States, or here in Canada, grocery bills are like flying out the roof and record profits for the grocery stores, but people are going hungry. No, we're going to ignore that. The science is telling us that people are actually, like the science of economics are telling that people are actually, going hungry. No, we're going to ignore that. We're just going to continue making profits. It's not just in marine science. It's everywhere. As soon as we hear what we don't want, we ignore it. Why bother facing the truth when we don't have to? So this continues to happen over and over and over again with fisheries, and we wonder why we're overfishing. It's not that we have to stop eating seafood. It's that we have to stop going over our catch limits. That the resource in the ocean for seafood is finite. We have to understand that. We can't just continue to increase catch limits after scientists who know what they're doing. Don't just look for the number that is the best for you. Look for the number that's the truth. In fact, look for the number that's the most conservative and work off that number. I know it's affecting livelihoods, and that is almost a completely different podcast, right? Because we don't know how this is affecting the livelihoods of the fishing community. But I'll tell you what's happening. If we run out of fish, it's going to affect the lives of the fishing community in all of those countries, in the EU, in the UK, and in Norway. We're going to see that happen. According to the article, it says this year, a provisional estimate by DEFRA has found the same number of jointly managed stocks has been set in line with or lower than scientific advice as last year, the third since the new regime came into place. But you've got to remember, those were already over the catch limits that were set by the scientific advice. Among the allocations were opportunities on stocks that scientists do not think should be fished at all, including 2 new at-risk species. So the Channel and Celtic Seas pollock and the Irish sea sole. So 2 species that are actually at risk, and scientists are like, no, don't fish these. No, we're going to fish them. We're going to put limits on them, though. Ignoring scientific advice. And it may not be as much of ignoring scientific advice, but looking at different advice that is more favorable to them instead of looking at what's the most conservative advice. Because that's what I would be going with. Let's go with the most conservative and let's build off of that. If the populations increase, great. You can change your management style next year, or the catch limits next year. But let's start off really conservative because we haven't been. 65% above what the catch limits were advised, 57% above what catch limits were advised, and 50%. It's getting lower, but let's move a little faster. Let's get right to that level. And the one thing that I don't have in front of me, or I don't have the information on, is what is the effect on the fishing community in the short term as well as in the long term. That matters. The fishing community matters in this situation because it's affecting their livelihood, and we don't want to affect their livelihood to a point where they can't eat either or they can't make a living. However, long term says if they continue this way, they may not be able to make a living at all in the future. So there's a lot to look at here, especially when you're looking at species that are larger. When you look at these large species, like in Canada, the cod were large fish. They were great fish to have. They were sought after. They were big enough to get a lot of money for them. But then when they disappeared, we started to see haddock and halibut disappear on the east coast of Canada and the U.S., then we started to see the increase of smaller pelagic fish instead of larger demersal fish, which the demersal is on the bottom of the ocean. So the smaller pelagic fish started to increase. And now we're starting to see them decrease in population and abundance because the fisheries have been like, oh, if we can't fish for cod, halibut, or haddock as much, let's start fishing these other fish that we're catching. And then those get smaller and smaller. Because what happens is when you fish, you take the biggest, right? You want the biggest. And there's usually catch size limits, where you can only keep over a certain size. But then if you always take those bigger fish, the ones with the best genes, to give you the best yield, eventually you're not going to have those big fish in the gene pool anymore. So you're only going to have smaller fish of that species. And that's when you start to see like the change in the population, the change in the catch. And then you're starting to take more time to catch. So the catch per unit effort increases. Take more time to catch the better fish that'll yield you more in less time than you do the smaller fish. So it's called fishing down the food line. That's basically what it is. Or fishing down the food web. That's what it is. And that's what we're doing. That's what we continue to do. But it seems like even though we know the information, even though the people know that you should set quotas, set catch limits, don't ignore the scientific advice, right? Work with the fishing community and to have them understand what predicament we're in here, and then help them and help us move forward. But we don't do that. We ignore the scientific advice, give in to the fishing community all the time. And then eventually in the long term, the fishing community comes back and is like, hey, what happened? There's no more fish anymore. We can't make a living. We didn't do our, like the government basically has to say, we did not do our job. And that's what happens. So I want you guys to think about that. And I want you to watch your government and say, hey, we need to make sure that we're following everything. If you have an organization that does a fisheries audit like Oceana Canada, maybe I know there's an Oceana UK in there. I know Oceana UK has come out against this decision. And there's Oceanas all over the world, but there's also other great organizations out there that are looking at fisheries. Oceana just tends to be one of the ones that will follow fisheries because that's what they do. That's what their mission is. And so, keep an eye out. Make sure that your government representative understands if you want to protect the ocean, this is what they need to understand. They need to understand that catch limits matter and that we cannot go over those catch limits for too long because we're going to see a decrease in the population. So what in the heck are they thinking? So that's what I have to say for today about this article. It's really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If you want to send me an email, you can do so. speakupforblue.com/contact. You can just fill out the form. It goes right to my email. I'll be happy to answer back. You want to send me a voicemail, you can do that too. You just go to the speakupforblue.com and there's on the right-hand side, the bottom right, there's a microphone. Click that. I'd love to hear your voice. And if you want to share this episode for somebody who's also worried or wondering what's happening with the ocean, especially with fisheries, you can do so by just going to your app, click the copy link, and then just share. Or just a lot of the apps now have a share button. And I would love to hear where you're listening to this podcast on. There's a new app out called Bullhorn, which I really like, by the way, and I've been getting a lot of listens from there. So I'm interested in how you feel about that app and whatever app you listen to. I'd love to hear from it. Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's it for today's episode. I want to thank you so much. I'm publishing this on Christmas Day, so Merry Christmas for those of you who celebrate. And I'll be posting all throughout the holidays. If you're celebrating something different at a different time, happy holidays. I hope you enjoy your time with family and have some fun, have some great food, and I'd love to hear from you. All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. You've been listening to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.